Wait.
And I wanted to... There we go. Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming out today. I want to give a big thank you to Apple and Big Jaw for supporting wonderful artists and giving a voice for young artists. And without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. Hi, my name is Ari, and I'm a freelance illustrator, designer, and 3D artist. Now, those are a lot of fancy, complicated words, so I think I'm going to hop all the way back to the beginning to really explain who I am. So let's start from the beginning. So, this is me. Ever since I was little, all I wanted to do was draw characters. And my reason for that is characters tell a story. And since a young age, I've always been drawn to stories. So one of my favorite things to do when I was growing up would be running straight home, checking the newspaper, and looking at the black and white comic strips that I saw daily. And of course, the best day of the week was Saturday because that was the once-a-week color edition. So that was definitely a privilege. And I also grew up loving animation and watching a lot of animation. And some of my favorites were late 90s and early 2000 classics. So naturally, loving comics and animation, I decided that I wanted to learn more about art. So this led me to taking some after-school art lessons in middle school and in high school. But it would be a long time until I went back to doing cartoony type of work because all of my teachers told me you have to learn a foundation in color and perspective and anatomy and all the drawing foundations. So I continued to practice. I continued to learn and grow as an artist. And this led me to high school, where I was fortunate enough to be offered a computer animation class at my high school. So it's actually a class of 15, and I was the only girl in the class, and I was probably the worst technician of the bunch. But my teacher was super encouraging, and she really saw my passion for design. And she said, "Don't let the program get in your way. Why don't you go study this at art school? Because you really have a knack for it." And that's what I did. So right before I went to art school, I got a really cool opportunity to paint a piano for this organization, Sing for Hope. And you'll see later in the presentation that this actually circles back around as I would later on paint another piano for them. But I wanted to highlight this as an early story of how important it is to break the rules a little bit and not take everything that you see at face value. My story behind this was, I noticed that there were a bunch of pianos that were being placed all over in New York City. And I saw that the age limit was 18 years old. At the time, I was a high school senior, and I was a couple months shy of that. So I emailed them, I called them, I told them that I was a passionate artist, and I was about to start my journey at School of Visual Arts in a couple months. And because of that, they made an exception and they let me do it. So this is something that I'll be highlighting on later on in the presentation of sometimes it's okay to bend the rules a little, and you'd be surprised of what you can accomplish and achieve when you keep your mind open to doing things. So in the fall of 2013, I began my journey at School of Visual Arts, where I majored in computer art, animation, and visual effects. So, what exactly is that? Because that sounds like a lot of words too. So, in our major, we really became prepared to be the ultimate digital masters. So, we learned how to shoot video, we learned how to take photos, we learned how to design posters, which I thought I would show off as my first element of something that I did only a couple months after entering school. And something really cool that SVA Computer Art does is allow students to major and focus on two areas: computer animation and visual effects. So short. So these are two little gifts from the short. It's really fun. And then senior year, I got to work on my own animated piece. Which is fun. So, as I was going through this process of creating characters in 3D, I kind of started to realize something along this journey, which was I actually enjoyed the design process even more than I did creating the characters in 3D. So you can see what I mean on all the way on the lower right-hand side. That is the hand-painted digital sketch that I made that eventually led to this character that I made. And you can see more little hints and hints of this being drawn to illustration and design throughout the process as I started to create a lot more digital paintings throughout my journey at SVA. So this was actually a piece that I made after visiting Mexico City with my family, and did a little character lineup from the Nutcracker. And finally, we have this 50 Girls, 50 Poses piece that I did. And the reason I'm highlighting this is because I actually got to paint another piano for Sing for Hope again in 2016. So as I was doing all this digital stuff and realizing more and more that illustration was also another passion of mine, I kind of came to a crossroads. Which should I pick, right? Should I pick 3D animation, which is what I went to school for, or should I take a different route and go more into digital illustration? And my thesis poster was actually kind of a pushing point for me. Because as these thesis films are screened, everyone's proud to showcase their work. And for me, my biggest highlight was actually the design aspect of the project, which was the SVA logo, which was chosen to be, I guess, the class of 2017's logo, as well as the poster design. So that was a little bit of a pushing point for me. So, this leads us to postgraduate. And this part of the presentation, I want to talk about the most, because I think when people graduate from school, there's often a little bit of confusion, right? What's the next step? Where are you supposed to go? How do you make contacts? And for me, this was definitely the case because I was going down a slightly different route than my major. I was not an illustration major. So the one thing that I really was forced to do was be creative in how I looked for work. So this leads me to my first ever freelance illustrating gig, and this was with University of Utah and published last year actually, so only 1 year ago. So how did I even get here? So a week after graduation, I got an alumni magazine in my house because I have 3 older sisters, so we get quite a few of them in our house. And I saw that there was an illustration in the magazine. And I looked at it and I saw, you know what, I think I can do that. I don't have a degree in this, but why not? So I went on a mission. I looked into every college in the United States and saw who was in charge of their alumni magazines. And I contacted all of them. And after that, I thought, okay, well, why stop myself there? I can contact people in Canada. I can contact people in New Zealand, in Australia, anywhere where they speak English. Why do I have to limit myself to just this New York bubble when I can work remotely, right? And because I just applied to such a wide quantity, I think that really helped in landing the first gig. And you'll often find the first one is the hardest to get, and once you get that first one, you have a little bit more to build off of. So, after I went through the process of colleges, I was a little stuck. Where do you go next? I contacted all the colleges. Now where do I get my freelance? So, my next idea was local businesses and small startups. So, what was my reasoning behind that? Well, a small startup company that has under brochures. So I went on bulk again, and I contacted as many as I could. And I got a reply from a small Philadelphia startup, and they told me, listen, we love your work, but we don't have a need for it, but I have a friend in California, and she's designing her own indie comic and card game. And so we hooked up that connection, and that's actually how I got this next gig, which was designing a card game. So this card game was really fun. I got to design over 14 animals, and the only prompt I had was these one-liners. So this one-liner was a bear and a fish getting married, but unhappy about it. This one was a beaver, duck, and lobster winning the Olympics. These were two pandas sumo wrestling, everyone's favorite wizarding platypus, flamingo photographer, and finally a awkward rabbit holding his yearbook photo. And the most fun part of the job was that I also got to do a little bit of design as well. So I got to do the back of the card as well as the design for the front box. So this might lead you to think, okay, this sounds amazing. This girl's getting gigs left and right. She graduated a couple months ago. And I really want to stop for a second here and say that's not the case for any artist, especially a freelancer. Freelancers will go through ups and downs. And this is an important part in your journey, not to get discouraged and really to keep pushing forward. So in between that card game point, that was a low point for me. And it was really up to me in those moments to push even harder when it came to networking and connections. So in the beginning of October, I saw a job posting from UCLA's Autism Research Lab that they were looking for an illustrator. And this sounded like an amazing opportunity, and I knew that if I just applied like everyone else, my resume would get thrown in the garbage can and mixed around with everyone else's, and I didn't want that. So I was persistent. I sent out additional samples of what I thought would work for their booklet. I emailed them, I made phone calls, and I really tried to find out who was actually hiring for this job, right? How can you get your connection beyond the point of standardemail.co, right? You want to find out who that actual person is. And it was through that I was able to get this gig, which is actually my longest running gig. This is actually a year-long contract that is continually going. So this job is really amazing. A year out of graduating school, I never would have anticipated that as an artist, I would be working for an autism research center. It's just completely crazy what you can do when you keep your mind open. So this book is actually going to be printed in black and white, and its purpose is really giving and providing the information to lower income neighborhoods, to people who might not have information or access to the latest research in autism. So these are basically going to be accompanied alongside text, and it's really oriented towards parents and kids to kind of bridge that gap between research and something that people can actually use. So after that, I continued to be open towards new experiences and doing a lot of different types of jobs in art. And this leads me to a new point, which are connection points. And what I mean when I say that is often one type of gig can lead to another. So this gig was actually for Utah State University for their Spring 2018 Alumni Magazine. And I certainly don't think it's a coincidence that I was able to get Utah State after I had a piece with University of Utah. So, and none is more the case than when I started to dive into some product illustration. So these little keyrings on the left were some designs that I did early in 2018 for this small startup called Magnet. And they make these little like magnetic keychains that you can use to hold your bags. And it was because really testing out, experimenting, and trying new things to learn this information. And I even kept my mind open to doing a little bit of graphic design, so long as there were little bits of illustration tied into it. So I got to make a little animated GIF, and I even made a book cover too for the time being. So all of this leads me to my last segment, which is creating personal work. So why do we create personal work as an artist? Well, obviously we like making stuff, which is why we're artists. But personal work is actually really important because personal work is often the work that gets you hired for new jobs. So often I'll actually have companies or brands hire me because they like my personal work more than the actual work that I've done out in the real world. And none is more the case than with this series that I did last summer called Basketball Paper Girls. And you'll see that one big element in my work is really bright colors, playing around with shapes, and playing around with texture. And one thing I really like recommending to artists is if you turn up the lights in a room, would you be able to see your character and recognize them in silhouette or in shadow form? And I think that this series does a nice job of showcasing that. And here's two other characters also from the series. And sometimes your personal work can actually be based off a story. So it doesn't have to be entirely new. It can be something that's existing, right? That's your take on the subject. And that's what I did with this piece here, which is my interpretation of what Eve would look like from the Garden of Eden. And sometimes work can be personal. It can still be fun and bright and colorful and creative, but have meaning to you. And that's kind of what I did with this piece on the left here. This piece is actually called Graduation. And if you look very closely, you'll notice that there's a black graduation cap on top of this character's head, with the mazes just representing the journey of trying to figure out everything and the ups and downs that come with being an artist. And then sometimes the work doesn't have to mean anything at all. I think that there's a lot of pressure on artists that each piece of work that you do has to mean so much to you. And we tend to treat our artwork kind of like a baby. We want it to be exactly perfect, and we're not going to move on until it's exactly how we want it to be. And one thing that's really helped me in my career is not treating anything like that. Consistently moving forward and testing out different things has really helped me. And this piece on the right was just that. It was just a fun piece about how people text. I didn't overthink it, and I really just went all out and made something that was fun for myself. So, this is the speaking part of the presentation. I would love if you follow me, send me out an email if you have any questions. You can also check out more work on my website by clicking on any